Dr. Bob Beck will not be giving a workshop tomorrow. This is your chance to hear him. It's by his choice because he wants to attend other workshops.
Yeah.
That's the way with our speakers. They're humble. And it's tough to be humble when you're good, isn't it? Is everybody in here? You know Dr. Bob Beck, Doctor of Science. And he's known lots of places. He goes a lot of places, or has. He has been prohibited from being with us for a couple of years for health reasons. We're very happy that he's back this year. And we trust he can get by without those artificial knees that they keep telling him he might need. And so send all your best energies his way to prevent that thing from being necessary. But he's always working on ingenious little electronic devices to assist in many different areas. And we're talking about primarily your own personal health and that sort of thing today. And so I want to give him 50 minutes and let him go at it in whichever way he would like. And that's not much time, but he can distill a lot of his knowledge and shorten up a lot of the years of research that he's put into these things. He comes from Los Angeles area, California, and I don't think he needs much of any introduction other than here he is. Welcome him this afternoon. Are you glad he's with us?
Thank you, Dean.
You might want this too, I don't know.
Okay, let's use this too. Am I getting through to the back? Oh, whoa.
No, they say no. Give me the one with the cord.
Okay. I've been wondering for the last 2 days how to launch this. And I think I'll fall back on something that I learned from Paul Savin about 9 or 10 years ago. Paul is one of us. He's one of our family. He was addressing a group of learned doctors, mostly medical doctors, on some rather...
We're getting a lot of feedback right now. More buzz than feedback, and there's not even any music.
Okay. We'll let the expert do what he can here. How are we doing?
See if that'll work.
Hello, test, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you very much. And he was being rather badly heckled by a couple of these learned doctors who did not wish any more information on top of what they already knew, which was everything. And one of the doctors finally couldn't take it any longer, and he said, Mr. Savin, what gives you the right to come and address this august group with your psychotronic stuff? And it came to him. Paul is but an humble channel. He says, I am a feces filter. Actually, he used the generic term, but since this tape might be played on KPFK someday and they're having trouble with the FCC, he immediately had the undivided attention of the entire audience. And he said, you know, folks, back in the South African diamond mines, occasionally one of the native workers would swallow a very large diamond. So in order to avoid this fellow making any money on his employment, they would x-ray all of them when they were let out for their weekly off time every month, and sometimes a diamond would show up in the stomach. So they would lock him in this little room, give him some castor oil, and over there in the corner was this special commode. An awful lot of feces went through, but occasionally they got the diamond. So what I want to share with you today is a diamond that happened to pop on the scene in the United States. The first time I heard about this was in February of this year. My dear friend Gene Myers, the world's second greatest holistic dentist, he's got to be this. We haven't found the greatest yet. He's got to be out there somewhere. But how many of you know Gene Myers? Okay. Said, Bob, you have simply got to come up to Dr. Levin's clinic and meet some Russians who have brought what they feel to be a brand new technology to the West. They have discovered what they think is microwave resonance therapy. They came here with a book, and I happen to see a copy of this. It's maybe 2 3/4 inches thick, with 8,000 case histories of everything from septic femur to incurable diseases hither and yon. And I hope I remember not to use the word cure here, because naturally I'm not a licensed practitioner. Many of you in the room are. But these amazing spontaneous remissions began happening shortly after this device was used on them. So I thought, oh no, not another one. I must be the judge, jury, and executioner of at least 30 of these things every year. And once about every 5 years, we find something of value. The rest of the time, it turns out to be a placebo or a copy of somebody else's technology. So I went up there rather begrudgingly. The host doctor, a medical doctor, MD, had taken one of the operating theaters, put folding chairs like we have in here today, and made it into a screening room where a slideshow was being presented. It cost $300 to sit there for 50 minutes and watch the slideshow. If you wanted a treatment, it was $600 for a series. I believe it was $100 per treatment. 6 of them lasting typically 10 minutes each. They had about 6 of these devices in the United States. And by the way, we notice now it's trickling in, and our good friend Nick Trotter back here sold me a copy of one. I think this was his only copy. Microwave Resonance Therapy and Electroacupuncture. Abstracts, First Symposium, Provisional Research Collective, Ukraine, 1989. Fundamental Aspects of MRT, Problems of Living System Stability, and the Application of MRT in Closely Related Problems of Clinical and Experimental Medicine. Now, a number of these very thick booklets are floating around the United States now. My agreement with myself and my conscience was that if the Russians had something here which was of obvious value and was unique, I would get them an audience with the Fetzer Foundation in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I happen to have gotten a grant from them, bless their hearts, for pioneering work. I've also received 3 international awards in science and medicine for the development of the brain tuner, and we have 2 dealers here which we'll introduce you to in a moment. And so because I had this entree with Fetzer, I was allowed to see their slideshow for free. I was allowed to observe them treating, in this case, about a dozen different conditions. One was arthritis of the knees, another one was a terminal, I don't want to go into the details, it's all in the literature. So I didn't have to pay. When they got around to giving me my $600 treatment for free, I was as skeptical as I usually am. I'm not that iconoclastic, but I've seen a lot of material go down the creek over the years. I got up off the table. I was able to use both knees without pain. The next morning, I noticed that a dermatitis that I had had for about 6 years had vanished. I used to leave a little pile of dandruff behind me wherever I sat. I felt great, so the next day they had my undivided attention. They were proving what they had said. At this time, I did what any Crusader Rabbit or Don Quixote or boy scientist would like to do. I borrowed a very, very expensive spectrum analyzer from some associates on the Potomac. They hand-delivered the thing. It was sent out with an airline pilot. I used my optoelectronics frequency counters. In other words, I loaded a briefcase. I brought all of the instruments that I could muster to find out what it was the Soviets were actually doing, as opposed to what their reality was about what they're doing. When I was in high school, I was kind of a prestidigitator, and I knew that the patter would throw the audience off of what I was really doing, and the real name of the game is see what that person is doing. Don't take his patter for actuality. And with these instruments, all right, the patter went like this. We have discovered the life frequency itself. The life frequency is 60.237 gigahertz, not megahertz. When we apply this microwave resonance therapy to certain acupuncture points, which are fully delineated in the instructions that you'll have, we relieve pain, we increase the beta endorphin by 5,000%, we reestablish a free flow of the lymph, and the patient just naturally gets better. Now, this having been sort of an offshoot of traditional Chinese needle acupuncture, which has been with us for several thousand years, they were claiming about 95% effectiveness. Now, how many acupuncturists do we have out here? Oh, come on, fess up, that's better. Traditional needle acupuncture, according to some of the experts, works about 50% of the time. Electroacupuncture works about, 75 to 80, and the induction stimulus acupuncture, according to Dr. Roy Kupsanel, MD, works about 95% of the time. Now, since the 1960s, there had been a number of devices. Jerry Friedenstein and Robert Beck there sell this little AccuSpark or AccuZapper for about $100. This has been around since 1960 in various forms. These things had been effective, probably on the order of 80%. But what the Soviets were doing was something that appeared to be entirely different. There was no contact, no physical contact between the device and the human subject. There was no electrical shock. So when I went in there, I was prepared to get an actual frequency spectrum and frequency count with these special devices, which seldom go beyond 2.4 gigahertz. We had one with pre-scalers that went up into the, that went up a couple of one decade above that. And I was allowed, I used a little NLP and I established a little rapport and found that mirroring, lagging and leading the Soviets was a lot easier than the Californians. They let me test the device because they were pretty damn sure that I wasn't going to get a signature on these highly technical devices, and I didn't. I must have had $150,000 worth of instrumentation in that briefcase when I climbed the stairs at 8730 Sunset Boulevard to see what these people were actually doing. Coherent signal, nothing. Field strength meter, nothing. Counter, nothing. Random noise. A few things that we probably don't want to talk about because they're a little bit controversial, nothing. But I pulled out a device that I published on in 1972, which is a partial scalar wave detector. And the little instructions that come with this device tell you what's in here and how it's built. And what I got when they turned on their device, does that sound familiar to some of you? Woodpecker, right. It wasn't a coherent signal like they had claimed. It wasn't in the gigahertz range. It was an impulse wave. An impulse wave is a highly nonlinear spark. The spark has several other attributes. It has an acoustical shock wave, which is what you can hear here with no amplification, no detection. And for the tape recorder, a lot of other characteristics. We heard this signature coming through the walls of about the 6 treatment rooms that they had set up in this clinic. By the way, the doctor had a backload of perhaps 200 patients that had failed any type of therapy. He is an electromedical doctor. He uses the Mora, the Ingemed. He's a homeopathist. He's an MD. And over the years, there was a backlog of patients who did not respond to anything that he was able to use in their behalf. So he wrote them letters, invited them to come over and get a $600 treatment with the Soviet device. And son of a gun, not only the operating theater, but the hallways were filled with folding chairs. The parking lots around there were full, and practically every single one of these intractable patients had gotten better. I interviewed many of them before, during, and after. I walked into a room, and here was a lady with tears streaming down her face. The first time in 10 years she'd been without pain, and she was weeping like you'll see at an evangelical faith healing session. So, wow, something here had finally clicked. We'd caught a diamond, and this is worth looking into. So, driving back from the Hollywood area, West LA, back down to Orange County where I'm living, a little light, very little small bulb went on in my head, and the great pumpkin came over and laid a seed. And I said, haven't I seen something like this in an Oriental medical catalog about 10 years ago? Now, well, let me digress here for a second. I don't throw any paper away. People come to my place and they see these cardboard cartons just stacked full, and they say, well, gee, what's this for? Well, in case of a nuclear attack, I don't need a bomb shelter. Also, I went to this class in creativity at UCLA where they had Saul Bass and they had Bucky Fuller and a lot of people that came in on each weekend on creativity. At no time were any two of them in agreement on what creativity is, but they only had one thing in common. Every creative person we've ever known in our lives lives in a very high order of disorder. So I must be pretty creative. So I started like a squirrel digging through this stuff, and sure as shooting, here comes this old OMS catalog from Massachusetts, Oriental Medical Supply, and here's a device called a Pachi Panosparker. Any of you acupuncturists seen these? I've got one here to show you. So for about $100, I had one of these shipped out on the airplane. I wanted it in a hurry. I couldn't believe that these people who had invented the airplane, who had invented radio, who had invented all of the technology through history, had reinvented the wheel. So when I got the device, I ran the signature on it. It was indistinguishable from the $18,000 each microwave resonance therapy stimulator. Wow! I felt like Prometheus. I'd stolen some fire from the gods and I'd gotten away with it. So my contract with myself that should they have something unique, I would get them an audience with the Fetzer Foundation, suddenly vanished, and I thought, oh my gosh, so far they've taken nearly $250,000 in cold, hard cash out of our economy back to the Soviet Union. Maybe we ought to expose what they're doing here. Yeah. Was that a time signal?
No, I said laughing up their sleeves.
Yeah, laughing up their sleeves. Now, I'm on the horns of a dilemma because Steve Rossi and Laverne Rossi's World Research Council has invited them as honored guests. They'll be here in October again, Dr. Sietko and the rest of them. And after this conference, I'm afraid the cat will be out of the bag. What these are fire starters, illuminating gas fire starters. Now you can go to any hardware store and get one of these things that has a long neck, piezoelectric, that you shove, and a quartz crystal generates a charge of about 14 to 20 kilovolts. Little spark happens at the end, like in your spark plug of your car, and that will illuminate the gas flame. So now you don't need a pilot light. They had taken a device made in Japan, cut the end off of it, put a plastic nose piece that they called a waveguide on the end to muffle the sound that the sparks make. And we're treating 4 acupuncture points on the patients, one on the big toe, One, the Governor Point on the side, Governor Point Hoku 34, and large intestine 1. It's all in the instructions. And they were walking out of there without pain. Now, this captured my emotional attention. And one thing that I still remembered how to do, I haven't been a college professor now since about, well, the early 1970s. But I taught my kiddies one thing, and I hope many of them got it. If you're in deep water, do your research. Put a bibliography on it. Find out who's done it before. Check it out. When I started looking into this, I found that Matsumoto in Japan and Monka had published what they called ion therapy about 6 years before the Soviets came up with this microwave resonance therapy. I see you know some of these works. We looked into it in a little greater depth and found that 50 years ago, Dr. S.S. Nehru, the brother of the ex-Prime Minister of India, had used the identical principle in healing the vast majority of animal, veterinary, and human patients that had come to his clinic. Now, I promised the people, I think it's terribly gauche to get up here and talk about a product or sell you something. So I promised several people, I don't know whether you're here today or not, that I would tell you how to make your own for very little money. Okay, is this going to be a good deal? Free. Nehru had taken an automobile spark plug. This was about 1933. The kind that you can find 100 of in the trash bin of any tune-up place in the world, or the filling station, or if you want to buy a brand new one, what are they, about 64 cents? He'd taken an automobile spark plug, hooked a Model T Ford induction coil. Any of you old-timers remember how much fun we used to have with those induction coils? Oh, hallelujah. Hooked that to it, put a battery to the induction coil, and he had a little sparker. And he would hold these things near certain acupuncture points. If the cattle had rheum, R-H-E-U-M, he'd hold it close to the eyes, and the cattle would just love it. It felt good. Cured them within a couple of days. He was using this thing as a little RF spark generator with amazing results. He published this in 1934 in a book called The Rural Uplift Advisor. Now that's rather bucolic. We found a copy of this book in Dr. Dobbins' library in California. Made a Xerox of it, so now we had them write, hey, maybe they didn't invent the airplane. Maybe it was the Wright brothers or Dumont or somebody. Maybe they didn't invent radio. That was Tesla and then Marconi and then, you know, yama yama. So I felt that any constraints I had in not blowing the secret, letting the cat out of the bag were gone. So I started contacting on my fax machine and my telephone European manufacturers and Pacific Rim manufacturers of illuminating gas starters. Now, first of all, I couldn't believe that anything this simple was causing this much of a physiological change in Homo sapiens. First batch, I managed to get my hands on 4 of these things. I gave one to George Burrell, another one to Dr. Gene Meyer, some other friends of mine. A couple of days later, these frantic telephone calls. Bob, we had a lady in here with scleroderma. That's where the fascia sort of turns to leather and the circulation shuts down, and she's had cold hands and great pain for, I think in her case it was about 5 years. Gave her one treatment. She called the next morning, she had feeling, proper temperature in her extremities, could move her face again. I said, oh no, come on. You're somebody they hired at Screen Extras Guild, and this isn't April the 1st, you know. But the reports started coming back. George Burrell, my friend in Santa Ana, this is Wally Grotz's half-brother, the chap who wrote the peroxide story, had a sciatic condition where he could hardly get out of a seat. Once he was up, he couldn't get down. Once he was down, he had a hard time getting up. came over, sat on my floor, and got up all by himself, and he said, "Look, Bob, no pain." I thought, uh-oh, we've got to have the greatest radionics box in the world here. This thing couldn't be working. So we took a batch of them down to the Southern California Dowsers, the Orange County Dowsers that meets at the Fullerton Library, and we began getting more and more results. So I said, wow, I think we'd better do some more beta testing here. So eventually we found a device made in Taiwan, patent number 32980, that cost a little bit less money than the $100, well, $77 units that is still in the OMS catalog, if any of you people want to purchase one and modify it. And we did a little work with scalar field enhancement. We got the spark gap far enough back so that if you put this in contact with the body, you don't get shocked like you do with the piezoelectric zappers. There are about a dozen of these on the market, AccuZapper, AccuSpark, AccuImpulsor, and what have you. Then we found an absolutely remarkable book called AccuImpulsor Therapy by Peter Mandel that was translated from the German into English, and the book cost more than the devices. So I bought a few of these and I passed them around to my friends that were using this thing, and everything started getting better. So I am tremendously indebted to the Soviet delegation for bringing this to my attention, but I am very resentful of the fact that a lot of doctors in the United States who parked their Learjets at Santa Monica Airport had paid $18,000 for the device. Now we have one that's listed back here in the back table for $2,995. I'm sure it is really an excellent unit. In fact, I am purchasing one when he has it, and it's going in my museum. But if you, sweet children, want to spend 64 cents for an automobile spark plug, I think Whitney Auto Parts, is that the old outfit that still has Model T Ford? Thank you. Spark coils, they were $5 back when we were building MWOs. They're probably $15 or $20 today. That was 25 years ago. If you want to build your own, you can do it for about $100 worth of junk. If you have anything in your junk boxes, if you're old hams like I was, you could build it for maybe $5. If you can find the proper Tesla coil type zapper, you can saw off the end, rebuild the spark gap, and make one for about $38, but you're going to have maybe an hour's work in this thing. So I put together about a dozen. In fact, I found 3 more. We had 28 down here, Dean, that we were selling for $100 for those of you who want to play with this particular technology on one condition. If you don't like it, send it back to me or my distributor back here. We'll give you your money plus 10% back on the deal. You get $110 back. $100 for the device, $10 interest, because it's a lot of trouble for you people to research this stuff. But you might look forward to the fact that microwave resonance therapy and electroacupuncture is going to be the big deal in holistic health starting about a couple of months ago. Now, this opened a Pandora's box. When I developed the first successful commercial negative ion generators in 1958, the first thing that I went about doing was to build an ion meter to find out if I was going in the right direction or the wrong direction with the accelerators, the little discharge points, and what have you. I know that today in this room, there are devices being sold for negative ion generation, or at least they were called this in New York at the Whole Life Expo, that produce no negative ions whatsoever. Now, the only way you can tell what you're doing is to build instrumentation that will measure the thing that you want to detect before you waste any time or money building the instrumentation. Doesn't that sound logical? How much of this have we got? Is it the right polarity? Are we putting out more or less than we claim? Now, I guess everybody in this room has heard about electroacupuncture according to Wahl. Reinhold Wahl, the German, was nominated for the Nobel Prize at one time. By the way, he died in February of, was it this year or last year? Pardon me? Last year. Okay, thank you. Last month, I was in Hawaii teaching a class in electromedicine and explaining the ins and outs of cranial electrostimulation, which is the generic term of the brain tuner. And I had the pleasure of being hosted one day by Dr. Fred Lam, L-A-M, M.D., who probably has the largest allergy practice in the world. People come to him from Australia, the Pacific Rim, the United States. He has them stacked in orbit because he gets results in a day that would take a standard medical allopathic allergist weeks to do by patch testing and other accredited things. And he uses an EAV device. He uses both the Computron of Doug Lieber. He uses the Dermatron, the Pickering, the authentic official Wahl device that's made in West Germany. And I used to think, how can you query with a substance on this honeycomb plate the body to see whether this is the proper homeopathic remedy and the proper dilution times 100, times 1,000, et cetera. And how can the body tell you what is going on in something that is not physically present in the body? And I thought, well, I had tested so many kinesiologists over the years, muscle testing, and whenever I put the wrong pill in the right envelope, I'm a bad person, but I gotta know what's going on out there, or mislabel the envelope, the reads always reflected the words on the envelope, seldom the contents of the pills inside of the sealed envelope. If some of you objective people noticed this? In other words, the intention of the operator overrides the signal-to-noise ratio or whatever is happening in the body unless he is truly detached from the results. Now, I don't know how we're going to do this. If anyone were perfect, he or she would be in heaven or hell. He wouldn't be here thrashing it out with the rest of us. But I found out that in the hands of Dr. Lam, the EAV devices were incredibly accurate. He could run a workup on a sheet, about 20 minutes worth of intensive work, and stick it aside somewhere, and one of his associates, one of his nurses could come in, redo the workup. Amazing correlation. Now, this gave me a great deal of confidence in EAV, so I said, no, we have to use EAV, electroacupuncture according to Wahl, to test the effects of this miraculous device on the human beings, which are the subjects. Now, those of you who are into electromedicine know that probably the least expensive device that's reliable is the Vitel, made by Scion Company in Utah, Pleasant Grove, Utah. The basic unit starts at about $900. Now, the Dermatron runs several $1,000s. From there, it goes up. The Doug Lieber Computron is about $22,000. The Intero right now is about $35,000 with the computer and the witness trays and what have you. And I said, now wait, we're out of the frying pan into the fire here. We've got them a $100 device that's going to relieve the pain in many of these people in minutes, but how are we going to prove this objectively? How can we establish the difference between actuality, have we made a difference here, or reality? Well, placebo is one of the strongest realities on the planet. Sometimes those placebo pills work when morphine sulfate won't. So I began looking into the background of EAV, and William Tiller, Bill Tiller at Stanford University, who's one of us, in spite of his PhDs, had done a paper several years ago, what are we actually measuring in EAV? And it turned out to be nothing but pure resistance. Dr. Fred Lamb had done a paper which we can make available to any of you who are sincerely interested in this esoteria, doing a cross-reference between the now available about 20 different EAV diagnostic devices, in which he made a very simple sketch, which is fully described in the instructions that come with this. And I'm going to run through this, and if anyone isn't clear on it, we'll draw it on the blackboard. You take a microammeter, 0 to 10. You put a 1.5 volt battery, the positive side to the point, rather the palm, I'll show you one here in a second, the point to the opposite polarity, a 300,000 ohm linear potentiometer in series with it, so you can set the 100 on the scale. Another shunt potentiometer across the meter, so you can set the center scale, so that if you take a Radio Shack ohm meter and a 100,000 ohm resistor, put that 100,000 ohm resistor between the probe that you use to test the acupuncture points and the palm electrode that you hold in the opposite hand, 100,000 ohms of little resistor here will read exactly 50 on the meter. Now this is going to cost you about $45 or $50. Microammeters, unless you can find one in surplus, which you generally can, are going to run $35 or so. A surplus one maybe $5 to $10. The battery is going to cost you $1. You saw a 4-inch piece of brass tubing. This one happens to be silver, about 1 inch in diameter for the palm electrode. You make about a 2 millimeter diameter probe. We'll show you how this works in a minute. You buy a $30 Beckman Type 78 digital multimeter. Can any of you see the numbers on this from down there? Well, at any rate, you now have a voltmeter for under $50 that will go in your shirt pocket that's accurate to 3 decimal places. You like that? That's my friend Lynn. Hey, ma. Great lecture last night, kid. All right. Now, Crusader Rabbit here is beginning to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. First of all, we got an expert down to my place. We use the Fairview Family Restaurant at the corner of Fairview and Warner as our boardroom because my place is now so cluttered that I'm physically ashamed of having any civilized person in there. I've got about 20 projects going on at the same time, besides brain tuners. So Jim Jost brought down a Dermatron. He also brought down a Computron. And because I tip well and because I haven't thrown a fit in the place in the last 3 years since I've lived there, they kind of humor me. The waitresses know, well, this guy's really eccentric, but you know, leave him alone. So Jules Finsky was down that day and we asked him if he wanted to donate his body to science, and yeah. We started testing various applications of this T-Zapper. Now, the beauty of Vol instrumentation, EAV, is that the acupuncture points on the fingers and on the toes will tell you, if you read their resistances, what is going on that meridian. If it reads on the meter between about 50 and 65, you've got a healthy puppy. If it reads lower resistance in this, higher conductance, you know that you're looking at inflammation. Maybe because the system is so irritated that the capillaries turn red and this thing is just highly conductive. If you read much below 40, you're looking at degeneration. You're looking at blockages. So, well, we won't mention his name again, had some major problems in the large intestine meridian and the gallbladder and so on. So we tried zapping him for about 10 seconds per point. Within, I think this whole routine took 10 times, about 40 seconds. Took about a minute by the time we did the measurements. They were all 100,000 ohms, 50 on these meters, some of which cost $10,000 to $15,000. So I whipped out my little pocket version, which is fully described in the instructions, and I got the same thing. So I said, wow. You know, when I'm right, I'm so happy about it because I've been wrong so many times in the past that I feel celebration is in order. So I went back to my word processor on my Macintosh, and I told people the numbers of what you ask for when you go into the electronics house. If you're sort of on low budget, since gasoline has gone up, you can get one for $24.95 at Radio Shack. If you don't want to spend $30 for a really top drawer like Beckman Instrument EAV meter, you can go to Radio Shack and get one off the shelf. Now, even small towns have these meters. Okay, so now we have a system that any ordinary house husband, I used to use the word housewife, but oh, my lady didn't like that at all. I'm a male chauvinist pig. Any house husband or any 14-year-old kid can put together and do just an awful lot of good. Now, the problem with needle acupuncture, which has been around approximately 5,000 years, is that it works about 50% of the time. People don't like to get stuck. People don't like to risk the possible invasion of foreign substances now that AIDS can be carried by mosquitoes and fleas. There is no physical abrasion of the skin when you use the Tesla coil type zapper. If you use the regular piezoelectric type, it requires an electrical contact to the body, and a whole lot of people have a re-stem on this, and they get very traumatized when you shock them. Also, the practitioner with the regular piezoelectric type zapper that I borrowed from Wayne Farr back there, you have to be 10 minutes, thank you. I can do it. I can do it. I speed up the recorder here. There is no contact or possibility of field cross-contamination between the fellow doing the treatment and the patient. Now, I know you can wash your hands in cold water and put the white light around you and burn a candle or whatever your persuasion, but sometimes you just don't want to take on those energies, right, Lynn? We have the world's greatest physiotherapist down here in the front row. He worked on me yesterday. I feel like $1 million. We have the world's greatest spiritual healer over here, Michael Rice. And as Michael put it, the body is energy. How does it work? I don't know. I have advanced degrees in electronics, physics, science, optics. Don't ask me what electricity is. I don't know. But we can sure do a lot of useful things with it. And this is another one of these things that we caught in the diamond trap that I had no faith in the beginning because it appeared to be too outre, too simple, too mysterious, $18,000, who can afford it, etc. Now, funny thing happened when I was researching the literature on this. Dr. Glenn Ryan at Stanford, heard of him, he's been to some of the psychotronics meetings, thank you, had done an experiment a few years ago which has not been thoroughly replicated, but in which I firmly believe, in which he took a laser beam, helium neon 632.8 nanometer, shot it across a culture dish that contained a reagent. Another culture dish downstream of that contained a culture. The culture acted as though the substance itself had been physically placed in the other Petri dish. The information was being carried by the electromagnetic coherent beam of that red light. Reminiscent of Gurvitch, remember mitogenic radiation, odic force, etc. Another thing had been discovered using both the piezoelectric and the spark type device. If you take a pill of a physical substance, whether it's legal or illegal, place it on Hoku 34, right here at the web of the hands, put the zapper over it, or the piezoelectric device. The system, within about 15 or 20 seconds, will act as though the physical substance itself had been ingested, smoked, or ingested. Now, I can't believe this. You're looking at a fellow who used to be an establishment scientist. Now I'm a kook, and I'm having a lot more fun, okay? I used to say I've got one foot on each banana peel. If I've got 5 minutes, we'll wind this up. We passed 7. Wow, smorgasbord. We passed this, these tests around. I don't want to embarrass these people because I might ruin their reputations, even in this august group. One fellow reported back that all of the homeopathic remedies that he had tried worked exactly as though he had put them under his tongue, ingested them, etc. Another fellow who didn't want to harm his lungs anymore called in and told about the marvelous orgasms he was having without smoking whatever it was. Of course, I never heard of that. Other people said, look, I've had achy joints, and I took my prednisone pill, cortisone, and instead of swallowing this, I was zapping it into this point. Now, for this, I have no explanation whatsoever, unless the scalar-type energy, the informational fields generated by this device, have somehow carried the molecular information from the substance directly into the acupuncture meridians, which are carrying the chi force, key force, the primal energy to the rest of the body. And this opens up a third Pandora's box. And as the lady holds up the 5-minute sign blazed in letters of fire across the sky, I'm going to get off of here before my allotted time by setting a precedent and stopping in about 30 seconds. Now, Dean said, well, Bob, while you're coming over here, bring a few of these. You'll probably sell them. Well, I brought too few. Besides, he gets 10%, which justifies my being up here. I've got about 6 or 7 of these things left, and if anybody wants them and will agree with me that if you don't like them, if they don't work, you will return them for your money back plus 10%. We can let you have them today. I've got another batch of these coming from the Orient. They're going, well, in fact, they are on board. I get to pick them up when I get home, and we'll have some more. And then they're going to be $150. Ron Isaacs, would you stand up for a second? He's going to distribute them. My dear friends down here, Don Paris and Ilona, are going to be distributing. And they'll be $150, which we think is a hell of a lot better deal than $18,000. And I pay the money back guarantee, so it's a no-risk situation. Okay, kids? Ron, do you have any brain tuners left?
Nope, all sold out.
Do you guys have any brain tuners left? Stand up here, Don Paris. If you want one of those, their booth is right on this table. It's even with me about the second one down. Now that's it. 5 minutes, it's over. Thanks for listening to me. We'll see you again next year.
Thanks, Bob. Now let's do this.